Hello, YouTube. It's me. I'm back. Hope you're well. We're talking about geometry. I'm doing a series of videos about geometry. In the basic first 12 numbers in geometry, the duodecimal system, the numbers 1 to 12, and I'm talking about the first three proportions in geometry that we're discussing at the moment. The first proportion in geometry is the circle, the width of a circle in relationship to its circumference. That's pi. Second ratio is the square root ratio, 2, square root 2. And its corresponding shape is the square. So in our creation myth, we have a circle and a square. For anyone that's new, my term, the creation myth, is my term I'm using for what we're doing to describe a development of geometry. It's a cosmology. And so it's a study of geometry. The first shape you make in geometry with a compass is the circle. The second important shape in geometry is the square. So in geometrical terms, we're talking about polar opposites as well. The circle in the creation myth is the first shape you make, but it's also perfect, right? A circle is perfect. Circle is a drawing on the plane that represents a sphere. A sphere is a three-dimensional circle, right? So the circle is a two-dimensional representation of the sphere. To bring order to that circle, first you make a circle. In our creation myth, in the geometry creation myth, to bring order, the creator or the person developing this system of geometry then constructs a square. And that square has a relationship to the circle. Its points of measurement come from the circumference of the circle, right? So if you evenly divide the circle up into 4 segments, and then create a square within those axes, those lines that you create from the point of the circle, and then you make a square. That's your square root 2 ratio, and its corresponding shape is the square. So I thought I'd mix it up a bit today, and talk about, my channel's about geometry and monumental propaganda and iconic propaganda, modern and ancient. So I thought I'd sort of mix it up today, whilst I'm doing these off-the-cuff videos. So the Gizeh pyramid here that you're looking at it represents the subject we're talking about. It's a temple. It's a squared circle, right? The plan view of the pyramid, Gizeh pyramid, is a squared circle. That's how you construct it. That's the geometry of it, right? And there's loads of layers to that, and we won't cover them all today. But today what we're going to cover is our first two shapes, the circle and the square. So temple building is about a marriage between the heaven and the earth, right? So the circle represents the heavens. That's the creation. It's everything, right? Check out the last video if you're not up to speed. But in geometrical terms, the circle is done by in our creation myth, is the first shape you make, and it represents the heavens, the creation, everything. It represents one. That's the circle. And the square is all about bringing order, but the square with its 4 points, there are lots of terms in our language: standing fourth square, and stuff like that, right? Square is about order, right? And its corresponding shape is, well, yeah, order's corresponding shape is the square, and it's the second shape you make in geometry. So the Giza pyramid represents a union of heaven and earth, right? And so does the symbology of the circle and the square. The creator first from his point swings his compass, makes a circle, and then he brings order to the circle from the chaos. So by making a square, and the union of the square and the circle is symbolic in temple building, right? So I wanted to make that point. We've got some modern propaganda on our picture today from the Palestine flag, right? I don't want to get too mystical here, but like, you know, there's propaganda where like our modern propaganda we have is like Islamic State and communism. Right, it's the red from the communist flag is about revolution, and you know there are I don't want to get too deep, but symbolically, you know, that triangle in the Palestinian flag has got a propaganda message in it, right? It's about a revolution. So, and it's symbolic that it's at the top of the pyramid. That has layers of esoteric meaning. In lots, you know, the Russians, I will say this, if you look at the Russian propaganda, especially the Soviet propaganda, red symbolizes blood and the revolution, right? It has deeper esoteric meanings in it as well, though. So there are layers of propaganda here, right? If you consider that the Egyptians encoded mathematical information into their monument, you know, it's a propaganda piece of architecture. It's monumental propaganda, right? So I wanted to sort of just touch on the subject today of monumental propaganda, and so, and you know, and the connection to do with modern propaganda and ancient propaganda. So let's move, because we're stuck on this picture. So I pulled this up today, just to talk about, like, you know, monumental propaganda layered in with modern propaganda. I don't want to talk too much about it. Look at my point is the temple here, in relation to what we just discussed with the Giza pyramid, right? Temples in the religions, a dome on top of a dome represents the circle, right? It's the heavens, and a dome is often on a square temple, or a rectangle, or a cube, or a rectangle base. So the symbology of the temple building is a union between the square, which is the temple, and then the roof of the temple, which is a circle, often, and that depicts the heavens. That's the symbology of the union. You know, in the three-dimensional union, it's a sphere. The sphere's union with a cube, right? A cube is the three-dimensional, you know, but what we're discussing is a square is a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional thing, right? And that is expressed in temple building, and that's going to be part of our discussions, right? So, but my point today, of like, it is like modern propaganda layered on top of ancient propaganda, religious propaganda, monumental propaganda, and iconic propaganda. I'll mention iconic propaganda again when we move through this, maybe I should have sped this up. Right. So this is just a picture I pulled offline. Right. There's nothing meaningful to me about it apart from the basic, part of our discussion today. It ties in with geomancy. Temple building, a term called geomancy was building and constructing cities or human habitations to be in harmony with the heavens, right? And so symbolically, like the layout of a town square and all of that stuff ties into an ancient craft. The craft was called geomancy. Now we call it town planning, right? Architects, and architects that studied historical architecture would be familiar with this subject. So let's move on, because here's a local church to me, right? It's called St. Mary's. The arch here, the arch is like a Gothic arch, right? A Gothic arch comes from the Vesica Pisces. But if you notice, within inside the Gothic arch here, we've got a cross. But the cross represents the square, which is order, right? And the circle within that arch represents the heavens. So what we're talking about is a basic union of the heavens and the earth, represented in the basic shapes of the square and the circle, which is the sphere and the cube, or a cube, right? This is a Christian symbol with the four evangelicals, right? So the archangels. So we've got the union of two circles here. We've got the symbology of a circle. So this is where the meaning of iconic propaganda. This is the deep meaning of it. This is the Vesica Pisces here with Jesus in it, in a certain image, right? It's an iconic image. And the symbology of this iconic image is Christian propaganda. But it's got the same symbology in it. It's a union of circles represented by the Vesica Pisces. And then we've got the order, the heavenly order, God's order, represented by the rectangle. So that's the symbology of the temples. And it's a symbolic of the heavenly union of a circle, or the marriage of a circle and a square. It's a cosmology. And there are layers of meaning to it, right? There's geometrical information in it. There's iconic propaganda to do with Christianity, right? In the figure of Jesus. So Jesus is in the top segment of the Vesica Pisces. That represents the heavens. So there's layers of meaning to that, right? A column, architecturally, the plan view of a column is a circle, right? On top of a circle is a capital. On the top of the head is the crown, and it's at that point. It's always represented in the point at the top of the triangle, right? It's a classic, iconic image. You have modern pictures of iconic propaganda that people use, right? It's a classic, iconic propaganda picture, tied into monumental propaganda as well. This is the whole point of my channel. And excuse me if I digress. I've made my point on this picture. It's the gnosis, right? The information never disappeared. It's a lot of it is layered in the literature of the different mystery schools. Christian mysticism, Jewish mysticism. There was a big dark age where the knowledge didn't disappear completely, but a lot of it was lost, right? The basic story is that through the Roman and Christian epochs and the book burnings through the Romans and Christians, the Arabs did protect some of the knowledge, right? It wasn't just the temples of, it wasn't really just the Library of Alexander that got burnt and all the books got lost there. There were other centers of learning, right? There were mass book burnings over quite a long time, actually. Romans, and Christians. And so knowledge went into mystery schools, right? Some of these books were protected. The Arabs actually did protect a lot of the knowledge. When the Arab Empire sort of peaked, they protected a lot of the books and carried on the studies, right? And over about 100 years, started developing advanced systems of mathematics, came up with the theory of light speed, the Arabs, right? From knowledge of geometry. That's where this knowledge of geometry has led to, right? Our understanding of being able to measure time and space, coming up with theories of lights, what is light speed? How fast is it? The basic principles of measurement were developed from these systems of geometry, right? And that is the main part of our discussions. So we'll cover that with this picture. Classic iconic propaganda. I don't want to get too bogged on that. I think that's orthodox. Here's like, a classic Gothic arch. At the top of the arch, underneath the top of the arch, you've got, it's like, I can't quite see it very clearly, but that triangular form, it's like a tetratus, right? I just want to make a point about architecture, right? The symbols in architecture, about iconic propaganda, the subject of iconic propaganda through different epochs. You can have different images, different gods, whether it's Jesus or a different god or a political leader who knows the symbology, right? At the end of the day, architects know about, a lot of architects know about the deeper meanings of this symbology, and so do artists. Artists have been trying to tell us for years, right? I mean, some of the great artists were burned at the stake, right? For talking about the geometry, especially in some of the Catholic times. Let's not digress on that though. This is a Buddha. I think this is a Buddha representation of it. So, a union of a circle and a square represents the union of like heaven and earth, right? We're talking about in these videos I'm doing at the moment, the first three proportions of geometry. The first one is pi, the relationship of a width of a circle and its circumference. The second one is the square root ratio, the relationship of the width of a circle and its diagonal, right? That's square root 2 ratio. Then a square root 3 ratio that is created in the Vesica Pisces. Vesica Pisces makes two equilateral triangles. So from the union of two circles, we move into the union of two equilateral triangles. From that rhombus, from the Vesica Pisces. So if you've been following my videos, you should be on point by now. I don't want to get to a point where I become boring, but I'm just going to make that point today about the union of the square and a circle. You get a cross, right? So a cross is a symbol. It's got our square root 2 ratio proportion represented by the square, and the ratio of pi. The circle is the heavens, which represents number 1, and this all has to do with our creation myth, right? So we're talking about the symbology of the dome inside when you're looking up. The dome represents the heavens, but it's all coming from the temple, which is square, right? The union of heaven and earth. And that's what we're covering on our creation myth, right? We're talking about the geometrical relation, the geometry and the mathematical relationships of proportions that's created in geometry. You start off with a compass and make a circle. Then to bring order to that, you introduce the square, and that is done by creating two axes, right, that evenly squares the circle, the union of squaring the circle. This is the first squaring of the circle. This is the whole point of this video, the squaring, a squaring of the circle and its mathematical relationships. So then we go on to create square out of our circle, and we can create another circle. So the mathematical proportions and relationships between the two circles are significant. But we're developing a creation. This is a geometry creation myth. It's cosmology. The third stage in the creation is to introduce those two equilateral triangles, the first polygons. There are two triangles, right? And for the sake of argument, this is just, we're going along, you know, there's nothing literal to take. Or if you want to take things literally, take them how you want to. It's all symbolic. It's not meant to be too literal. But the union of a square and a circle. So I should have really, you know, made my point by now, I think, on this video. So I think I'm going to try wrapping this video up. William Blake did this picture, didn't he? But like, it's symbolic, you know, the compass is stylized as a square as well, right? The angle of it. It's a union of like the square and the circle. You can be sure William, was his name William Blake? Blake, you know, knew about the basic principles of geometry that we're discussing. Dog's kicking off. I just wanted to touch on the octagon. I'll do it quickly though. The octagon, it's easy. The octagon is important in our creation myth, but that the octagon is represented by the number 8. But that's just like a bit of a side note at the moment. Octagon is very important in architecture, in combining a relationship, you know, sort of a circle and a square. The dog's starting to kick off now. I'm going to wrap the video up, right? So this is a famous picture of Plato's birthday. It's got the two trees, two pillars in it, and it's just a picture of Plato in a temple. I've got to wrap it up. I wonder who that is. Could be, actually. I did get scam calls this time of day. I'll call them back in a minute. I'm not going to edit this. I'll leave it here on the picture though. Is there a better one to leave it on? I forgot what this picture is called, and I can't zoom on it. So it is relevant to our discussion. Right, look, this isn't the best picture, but I'm going to leave it here because like the dog is starting to get demanding. I think I need to take her for a walk. In class, so we're talking about inside the temple, union of the square and the circle. There's a bit of a stylized Vesica Pisces here in the middle with some Russian dude, right? It's an iconic propaganda piece in a church. But what we're discussing is, you know, within the temple, we've got the 4 pillars with a dome on top. On top of the dome, you've got a cross. So the symbology is within the temple of the circle or dome and its relationship to, you know, the base of the temple and the columns coming up, you know, between heaven and earth, or in a square, right? So it's the union of a square, a cube, or a sphere, or, you know, a square and a circle, right? Have a powerful one. Have a good weekend. I don't know if I'll do any videos over the weekend. I might work on an edited video, or I don't know. I'll see you on the other side. Have a good one. Have a powerful one. Cheers.